Taking a closer look, what did Japan's former prime minister do to anger China? And how does it play into countering the regime's threat? We spoke with Grant Newsham, Senior Fellow of Japan Forum for Strategic Studies and Director of One Korea Network, to find out how that might change with Abe's passing. Grant, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you on the show.
Oh, glad to be here. Thank you very much.
So what does Shinzo Abe, the former Japanese prime minister's assassination, mean for the region? So not just Japan, but also Taiwan and the broader Indo-Pacific.
Well, Prime Minister Abe really deserves credit for having turned Japan away from this mindless pacifism, which is really ignoring the threats to Japan, to freedom, free countries in the region. He's the guy who turned it around. And after he stepped down, he continued to be really a tireless proponent of a strong national defense for Japan, of free and open Indo-Pacific, which means the free nations getting together to protect their own interests, the things that have allowed the region to prosper. He was also a strong supporter of the US-Japan alliance and also support for Taiwan. And he did have a lot of influence, even post-retirement.
And so following his death, there's already been a lot of reports about kind of the legacy Abe is leaving behind, and you mentioned that too. So what did he do exactly in terms of China especially?
What he did is he set in motion a chain of activities that were going to improve Japan's national defense, its ability to defend itself and to defend its ideals. And what were those specifically? Well, first he managed to reverse a decade of cuts in the Japanese defense budget. So for every year of Abe's administration, he at least managed to get a small increase, and that was a huge change. He managed to change the interpretations of laws regarding so-called collective self-defense, which Japanese bureaucrats and politicians had used for years to handcuff the country so that it couldn't even do the most commonsensical things to build up its defense forces. Abe got that changed, and now you see the Japanese military out and about all over the region. It does real training, it engages with other nations, and none of this used to happen until Abe got that done. And he pushed it through in the face of really opposition from the political class, the commentariat. And that took some nerve. He also got the US-Japan defense guidelines changed. Successfully had that worked out with the Americans. So now Japan can be more of an ally. It can provide real support to US forces where before it couldn't. Additionally, he himself went out all over the world and he spoke up for Japan. And whereas Japanese politicians and prime ministers traditionally had been kind of quiet and they didn't go too many places, but he went out and he spoke up for, say, these democratic ideals. Additionally, you had him, he's the guy that started the Quad. It's an informal security grouping now, but it was Abe's idea that he got going the first time he was in office in 2006. That deserves credit for that. And the expression free and open Indo-Pacific, that's something that came out of his administration. He also kept the Trans-Pacific Partnership idea going after the Americans pulled out just before President Trump was elected. And that has been an important thing, both economically but also politically.
And speaking of that momentum, Grant, do you see that continuing going forward, even without Abe around?
I do. I think that it's pretty well taken hold in Japan's political class, even the Japanese military, but really in the public at large. And interestingly, the Japanese public has always, I think, had a better sense of foreign affairs than most of the Japanese politicians. And they understand the risks facing the country. And to them, it's simply a logical thing that Japan will improve its defense, that it will be able to work better with the Americans. So I think this is a sea change, and one doesn't like to use those words. But as I said, if you've been around Japan a while, today's Japan is practically unrecognizable from what it was a decade ago. And it's also, I think, important to remember that Japan is really, it's been a force for good. Look at its behavior since the end of World War II. You won't find a better behaved, more responsible nation that has done its best to, be a good country that actually is a positive force in the region and globally now.